The sweat on Harriet's dress had dried 3 hours ago, leaving salt stains along the cotton fabric as she sat on the wooden bench outside the train station in Steins Pass, New Mexico, watching the sun climb higher in the August sky of 1883. She had been waiting since dawn, her small leather trunk beside her, the telegram crumpled in her gloved hand telling her that her aunt would meet her here. But the platform remained empty except for the occasional tumbleweed that rolled past in the hot breeze. Her throat felt like sandpaper, her lips chapped despite the water she had rationed from her canteen, and she wondered if coming west had been the worst decision of her 22 years. Across the dusty street, Harrison Keller had been watching the woman for the better part of 2 hours from the shade of the general store's awning. He had ridden into town that morning to pick up supplies before heading back to the ranch where he worked as a foreman. But something about the sight of her sitting alone in the unforgiving heat had stopped him from completing his errands. She looked proper, like she belonged in Boston or Philadelphia, not in this dusty corner of New Mexico where the Apache wars had only recently settled and outlaws still ran wild in the mountains. Her dark hair was pinned up beneath a traveling hat that had seen better days, and even from this distance, he could see the exhaustion in the way she held herself. Harrison had been raised to help people in need, though the war and the years that followed had hardened him in ways his mother would not have recognized. At 26, he had already lived more lives than most men twice his age, first as a soldier, then as a scout, and now as a ranch hand trying to build something stable. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water, and he wore his hat low to keep the glare from blinding him. After another 15 minutes of watching the woman shift uncomfortably on the bench, he made his decision. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he crossed the street, his spurs jingling softly with each step. She looked up as his shadow fell across her, and he saw that her eyes were the most striking shade of blue-green he had ever seen, like the ocean he had glimpsed once during the war. They were also filled with a mixture of hope and wariness that made his chest tighten. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I don't mean to intrude, but I've noticed you've been sitting here for quite some time. Is there somewhere I can take you?" Brielle Garrett looked up at the cowboy standing before her, taking in his weathered face and the genuine concern in his expression. She had been warned about Western men, about their roughness and lack of manners, but this man spoke with courtesy and stood at a respectful distance. Still, she hesitated. She was alone in a strange place, and accepting help from a stranger went against everything her mother had taught her back in Pennsylvania. "I'm waiting for my aunt," she said, her voice hoarse from the heat. "She was supposed to meet me this morning." Harrison frowned, glancing at the position of the sun. It was nearly noon now, and the temperature had to be pushing past 90 degrees. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since the train arrived at 6, she admitted and saw his expression darken. "Madam, that's 6 hours in this heat. You need water and shade at the very least." He gestured toward the small hotel that sat adjacent to the train station. "The hotel has a dining room. You could wait there, send a telegram to your aunt, find out what happened." Brielle felt tears prick at her eyes, born of exhaustion and relief that someone had finally acknowledged her predicament. "I sent 2 telegrams already. There's been no response." Harrison's jaw tightened. Something was wrong here, that much was clear. A woman this fine did not sit unattended at a train station unless something had gone seriously awry. "What's your aunt's name? Maybe I know her or know of her." "Catherine Marsh. She has a homestead about 10 miles north of here, or so her letters said." Recognition flickered across Harrison's face, followed quickly by something that looked like regret. He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair before meeting her eyes again. "Madam, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Catherine Marsh passed away about 3 weeks ago. Fever took her. It was sudden." The world seemed to tilt beneath Brielle, and she gripped the edge of the bench to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "That cannot be. She wrote to me just last month telling me to come, that she needed help with the homestead, that there was a life for me here." "I'm sorry," Harrison said, and he meant it. He had seen that look before, the moment when someone's entire world collapsed. "Did you have other family here? Friends?" Brielle shook her head slowly, the reality of her situation crashing over her like a wave. She had spent her last dollars on the train ticket west, leaving behind a life in Pittsburgh that had become unbearable after her father's death and her stepmother's cruelty. She had no money for a return ticket, no place to go back to even if she did. She was stranded in a town she did not know, in a territory that felt as foreign as the moon. "Hey now," Harrison said gently, seeing the color drain from her face. "Don't you faint on me. Let's get you inside, get some food and water in you, and we'll figure this out." "I cannot pay for a hotel room," she said, her pride warring with her desperation. "I have almost nothing left." Harrison made a decision that would change both their lives, though he did not know it yet. "Don't worry about that right now. Come on." He reached for her trunk, lifting it easily despite its weight, and offered her his free arm. "My name's Harrison Keller. I work at the Double K Ranch about 5 miles east of here." Brielle stood on shaky legs, accepting his arm because she had no other choice. "Brielle Garrett." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Keller." "Just Harrison," he said, guiding her toward the hotel. "Mr. Keller was my father." The hotel dining room was blessedly cool, with thick adobe walls that kept out the worst of the heat. Harrison settled Brielle at a corner table and ordered her water, coffee, and a plate of beef stew with bread. She protested weakly about the expense, but he waved her off, sitting across from her and watching as she drank the water like a woman who had crossed a desert. "Slow down," he cautioned. "You'll make yourself sick." She forced herself to sip more slowly, feeling the water soothe her parched throat. The food arrived, and she ate with more restraint than she felt, aware that he was studying her with those keen eyes. "So you came all the way from Pittsburgh with no backup plan?" he asked, not unkindly. "I had a plan," Brielle said defensively. "My aunt was my plan. She wrote that she needed help, that she was getting older and the homestead was too much for her alone. She said there were opportunities here for a woman willing to work hard." She paused, setting down her spoon. "I had nothing left in Pittsburgh. My father died 2 years ago, and my stepmother made it clear I was no longer welcome in what had been my home." Harrison nodded slowly, understanding that kind of desperation. "Your aunt's homestead is still standing." "It's empty now, as far as I know. The land office probably hasn't processed her death yet, so there might be time to file a claim yourself if you wanted to try to hold on to it." Hope flickered in Brielle's eyes. "Could I do that? As a woman?" "The Homestead Act doesn't care if you're a man or woman, just that you're over 21 and willing to work the land." He leaned back in his chair, considering. "It won't be easy, though. That place needs work, and you'd need supplies, tools, seed for planting. It takes money to prove up a claim." The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. "I don't have money." "You could find work in town," Harrison suggested. "The hotel sometimes needs help, or the general store. Save up enough to get started." Even as he said it, he doubted it would work. This woman was clearly educated and refined, but she looked like a strong breeze could knock her over. The work available to women in Steins Pass was limited and often questionable. They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating her limited options. Harrison found himself reluctant to leave her, though he could not explain why. She was a stranger, and he had his own responsibilities waiting back at the ranch. But something about her drew him in, perhaps the intelligence in her eyes or the way she held herself together despite circumstances that would have broken lesser people. "I have a proposition," he said finally, surprising himself. "The Double K is owned by a man named Walter Kincaid. He's getting on in years, and his wife Dorothy has been wanting help around the main house for months. They've got a big operation, lots of hands to cook for, and Dorothy can't manage it all anymore. The pay's not much, but it includes room and board, and it would give you a safe place to stay while you figure things out." Brielle looked at him searchingly. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "No," he admitted, "but I know what it's like to be alone with no good options. And I'd hate to think of what might happen to you if you stayed in town with no money and no protection." He held her gaze. "I'm offering honest work, nothing more. The Kincaids are good people. They'll treat you fair." She wanted to trust him, this stranger with kind eyes and a steady voice. Everything in her upbringing told her to be cautious, but every instinct she possessed said that Harrison Keller was exactly what he appeared to be, a decent man trying to help. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll accept your offer, and I'll work hard to earn my keep." Relief washed over Harrison's face, though he tried to hide it. "Good. Finish your meal and we'll head out. It's a bit of a ride, but my horse can handle two if we go slow." They left the hotel 20 minutes later, Harrison carrying her trunk tied to his saddle. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, snorted at the extra weight but settled when Harrison stroked his neck and murmured to him. He helped Brielle mount first, then swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. "You ever ridden before?" he asked as they started down the main street. "Once or twice, when I was a child." She was acutely aware of his closeness, the solid warmth of him at her back, the strength in the arm that held her secure. It should have frightened her, but instead she felt safer than she had in months. "Just relax and move with the horse," he instructed. "Copper's gentle. He won't give you any trouble." They rode east out of Steins Pass, leaving the small cluster of buildings behind as they entered the vast expanse of desert and scrubland that defined this part of New Mexico territory. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, with distant mountains rising purple against the sky and strange plants that Brielle had never seen before dotting the sandy soil. The heat was intense, but there was something cleansing about it, as if it could burn away the past and leave only what was essential. Harrison pointed out landmarks as they rode, his voice low and pleasant near her ear. He showed her where the Apache used to camp before they were pushed onto reservations, where water could be found in underground springs, how to raid the land for signs of danger. She listened intently, storing away information that might save her life in this new world. "You said you worked as a foreman at the ranch," she said after a while. "What does that entail?" "I manage the day-to-day operations, oversee the hands, make sure the cattle are healthy and the fences are maintained. It's long hours and hard work, but honest." He paused. "I came out here 5 years ago from Texas, needed a fresh start after the war and some bad choices that followed it." "Were you a soldier?" she asked. "For the Confederacy, yeah. I was young and stupid and thought I understood what I was fighting for." His voice hardened. "Learned real quick that I was wrong. Spent the years after trying to atone for that." Brielle felt him tense behind her and changed the subject. "Tell me about the Kincaids." He relaxed slightly. "Walter came out here in the 50s before the war. Built the ranch from nothing with his wife Dorothy. They never had children, so they treat the hands like family. He's fair but expects hard work. Dorothy's got a sharp tongue but a soft heart. You'll like her." The Double K Ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent toward evening. It was larger than Brielle had expected, with a sprawling adobe main house, several outbuildings, a barn and corrals that held dozens of cattle and horses. Men moved about doing evening chores, and the smell of cooking food drifted on the breeze. Harrison rode straight to the main house and dismounted, then helped Brielle down. Her legs were shaky from the long ride, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared inside. He returned moments later with a woman who could only be Dorothy Kincaid. She was in her 60s, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She looked Brielle up and down with an expression that gave nothing away. "So you're the one Harrison's been going on about," Dorothy said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Brielle could not place. "Says you need work and a place to stay." "Yes, madam," Brielle said, lifting her chin. "I'm a hard worker and I learn quickly. I can cook and clean and do whatever needs doing." "Can you bake bread?" "Yes, madam. My grandmother taught me." "Can you handle feeding 20 men 3 times a day?" "I can try, madam." Dorothy's expression softened fractionally. "Harrison says your aunt died and left you stranded. That true?" "Yes, madam. Catherine Marsh was my mother's sister." "I knew Catherine. She was a good woman." Dorothy nodded, decision made. "All right, girl, you can stay. Room and board plus $15 a month. You'll work in the kitchen and help me with the house. Harrison will show you to your room." Relief flooded through Brielle so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you, Mrs. Kincaid. You won't regret this." "See that I don't," Dorothy said, but there was kindness in her eyes. She disappeared back inside, leaving Harrison and Brielle alone in the fading light. "Thank you," Brielle said, turning to face him fully for the first time since they had mounted his horse. "I don't know how to repay you for what you've done today." "No repayment needed," Harrison said, though he found himself reluctant to leave her. "You'll earn your keep here. The Kincaids work everyone hard, but they're fair about it." He picked up her trunk. "Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying." Her room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a wooden chest for her belongings. A window looked out over the corrals and the desert beyond. It was more than she had dared hope for this morning when she sat alone at the train station. "Meals are at 6, noon, and 6, Harrison said, setting her trunk down. "Dorothy will expect you in the kitchen at 5 tomorrow morning to start learning the routine." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Welcome to the Double K, Brielle." She smiled at him, a real smile that transformed her tired face. "Thank you, Harrison, for everything." He touched his hat brim and left, but the image of her smile stayed with him as he headed to the bunkhouse where the hands slept. Brielle woke before dawn the next morning, years of strict upbringing making it easy to rise early despite her exhaustion. She dressed quickly in her most practical dress, pinned up her hair, and made her way to the main house kitchen where Dorothy was already working. "Good," the older woman said approvingly. "You're on time. Now pay attention because I won't repeat myself." The next hours passed in a blur of instruction as Dorothy showed her where everything was kept, how much food to prepare for the hands, the particular preferences and quirks of the men who worked the ranch. Brielle absorbed it all, her hands falling naturally into the rhythm of chopping vegetables, mixing dough, and stirring pots on the massive cast iron stove. The hands came in for breakfast at 6. A rowdy group of men in dusty clothes who stomped the mud off their boots and took their seats at the long table with loud joking and laughter. Harrison was among them, and he caught her eye as he entered, giving her a small nod that somehow made her feel less nervous. The men ate with enthusiasm, complimenting the food and asking for seconds. Brielle moved among them, refilling coffee cups and bringing more biscuits, aware of their curious glances but not uncomfortable. These were working men, tired and hungry, not so different from the factory workers she had known in Pittsburgh. After the meal, Harrison lingered while the others returned to their chores. "How's it going?" he asked, helping her clear plates despite Dorothy's protests that it was not his job. "Well, I think," Brielle said. "Mrs. Kincaid is a good teacher." "That's one word for her," Harrison said with a slight smile. "Demanding is another." "I don't mind demanding. I mind cruelty, and she's not cruel." He studied her as she scraped plates into a bucket for the pigs. "No, she's not that. Neither is Walter." "You picked a good place to land, considering." "I didn't pick it," Brielle reminded him. "You brought me here." "Well, then I picked well," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary before he cleared his throat and headed for the door. "I'll see you at noon." The days settled into a pattern. Brielle rose before dawn, helped Dorothy prepare meals, cleaned the house, and fell into bed exhausted each night. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found herself adapting to ranch life more quickly than she would have imagined. Dorothy warmed to her gradually, sharing stories of the ranch's early days and teaching her skills that went beyond cooking, like treating minor injuries and dealing with the various personalities of the ranch hands. Harrison made a point of being present at meals, always finding a reason to linger afterward and talk with her. He told her about the ranch operations, the challenges of raising cattle in the desert, the constant threat of rustlers and predators. She told him about her life in Pittsburgh, her father's work as a schoolteacher, her love of books and learning. They discovered shared interests in unexpected places, both having read many of the same novels, both possessing a dry sense of humor that surprised laughter out of each other. "You're different from what I expected," Brielle admitted one evening when she found him waiting by the corral after dinner. 3 weeks had passed since she arrived at the Double K, and she had grown comfortable with his presence, looked forward to their conversations. "What did you expect?" Harrison asked, leaning against the fence rail and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Someone rougher, I suppose. Less educated. The novels I read about the West made cowboys out to be crude and violent," he laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Some of them are. But most of us are just men trying to make a living. I read when I can, though good books are hard to come by out here." He glanced at her. "What about me? Am I different from what you expected?" She considered the question seriously. "Everything about this place is different from what I expected." "But yes, you're different too. You're kind in a way that seems rare, especially to someone you had no obligation to help." "Maybe I saw something worth helping," he said quietly, and the air between them suddenly felt charged with possibility. Brielle's heart beat faster, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "I should get back inside. Mrs. Kincaid will wonder where I've gone." "Brielle," Harrison said, stopping her with a hand on her arm, "I'd like to take you into town on Sunday if you're willing. Show you around properly, maybe have lunch at the hotel." It was the first time he had suggested anything that resembled courting, and Brielle felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the lingering desert warmth. "I would like that," she said, meeting his eyes. "Very much." His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. "Good. I'll arrange it with Dorothy." Sunday arrived with perfect weather, clear and not quite as hot as the weeks before. Harrison had borrowed Walter's wagon for the trip, wanting Brielle to be comfortable rather than riding double on copper again. She wore her best dress, a deep blue that matched her eyes, and had taken extra care with her hair. "You look beautiful," Harrison said when she emerged from the house, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." He did, she thought. He had shaved and wore clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. He helped her into the wagon with a gentleness that contrasted with his obvious strength, then took his seat beside her and guided the horses toward town. The ride passed quickly, filled with easy conversation and comfortable silences. Harrison pointed out more features of the landscape, and Brielle found herself seeing beauty in the harsh desert that she had missed before. There was a stark magnificence to it, a sense of space and freedom that she had never experienced in the crowded streets of Pittsburgh. Steins Pass was more active on Sunday, with families coming in from surrounding ranches and homesteads for supplies and socializing. Harrison drove straight to the hotel where he had first fed her, and they took a table in the dining room that was now busy with the lunch crowd. "People are staring," Brielle murmured, aware of the curious glances directed their way. "Small town," Harrison said. "They're always interested in new people, and I don't usually come to town with a woman." He reached across the table and took her hand, a bold gesture that made her breath catch. "Let them look. I'm proud to be seen with you." They lingered over the meal, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and dreams. Harrison told her about growing up in Texas, about the brother he had lost in the war and the guilt he still carried. Brielle shared her grief over her father's death, the relief she felt at escaping her stepmother's house, her fear that she would never find a place where she truly belonged. "You belong here," Harrison said firmly. "At the ranch in New Mexico. Anyone can see that you've found your place." "Have I?" Brielle asked softly. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm pretending, like I'll wake up and be back in Pittsburgh." "You're not pretending. You're building a new life and doing a damn fine job of it." He squeezed her hand. "And I hope I'm part of that life if you'll have me." Her eyes widened. They had been dancing around their growing feelings for weeks, but this was the first time either had spoken so directly. "Harrison, I know it's fast," he interrupted. "I know you've only been here a few weeks and you probably think I'm crazy. But I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You're smart and strong and beautiful, and you make me want to be better than I am." Brielle felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I feel the same way. I was afraid to admit it, afraid it was too soon or that I was just grateful to you for saving me." "Is it gratitude?" he asked, searching her face. "No," she said with certainty. "It's more than that, so much more." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and achingly romantic. "Then we'll take our time, do this properly. I'll court you the right way, and when you're ready, I'll ask you to marry me. When I'm ready." She asked, a smile playing at her lips. "What if I'm ready now?" Harrison laughed, joy lighting up his face. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to do this right, Brielle. You deserve that." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the town together, Harrison introducing her to the shopkeepers and families he knew. Everyone was welcoming, curious but kind, and Brielle began to see how she might build a community here, might truly make this place her home. As the sun began to set, they drove back to the ranch in comfortable silence, Brielle's head resting against Harrison's shoulder. She felt happy in a way she had not experienced since her father's death, as if the broken pieces of her life were finally coming together in a pattern that made sense. The next months passed in a blur of work and courtship. Harrison was true to his word, taking time to woo her properly despite the demands of ranch life. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, taught her to ride on a gentle mare named Daisy, and spent every free moment in her company. They talked for hours about their hopes for the future, their fears and dreams, building a foundation of friendship that made their growing love even stronger. Walter and Dorothy watched the romance bloom with approval, both having grown fond of Brielle, and knowing that Harrison needed someone to anchor him. The other ranch hands teased Harrison mercilessly about being lovesick, but he took it with good humor, too happy to care about their jibes. In November, as the weather began to cool and the desert took on golden hues, Harrison arranged for them to visit Catherine Marsh's old homestead. Brielle had been thinking about the property for months, wondering if she should try to claim it, and Harrison wanted her to see it before making a decision. The homestead sat in a small valley with a creek running through it, rare and precious in this dry land. The house was modest but well built, with thick adobe walls and a covered porch. It needed work, repairs to the roof and windows, but the bones were good. "What do you think?" Harrison asked as they walked through the empty rooms. Brielle trailed her fingers along the wall, imagining the life her aunt had built here. "It's beautiful, peaceful. You could still claim it if you wanted. File with the land office, prove it up." She turned to face him, understanding what he was really asking. "What would you think about claiming it together?" Harrison's heart raced. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to wait anymore." Brielle crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "I'm saying I love you, Harrison Keller, and I want to build a life with you. Here on this land if you'll have me." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I'll have you. God, Brielle, I've been waiting to hear you say that for months." He drew back to look at her face. "Marry me, properly with a church and a preacher and all the trappings. Then we'll claim this land together and build our future on it." "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He kissed her then, the first real kiss they had shared, and it was everything she had dreamed it would be. Sweet and passionate and full of promise for all the days to come. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Steins Pass, with Walter and Dorothy standing up for them, and the entire ranch in attendance. Brielle wore a simple white dress that Dorothy had helped her make, and Harrison wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortably formal but devastatingly handsome. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the celebration that followed lasted well into the night. The Kincaids gave them a week away from the ranch as a wedding gift, and Harrison and Brielle spent it at the homestead, working side by side to make it habitable. They repaired the roof, replaced broken windows, and cleaned years of dust and neglect. Harrison brought furniture from town, pieces they picked out together, and Brielle made curtains and planted a small garden. At night, they lay together in the bed they had placed in the main bedroom, talking and making love and planning their future. Brielle had never imagined she could be this happy, that intimacy could be both tender and passionate, that marriage could be a true partnership. "I never thought I'd have this," Harrison confessed one night, holding her close. "After the war, after the things I did and saw, I didn't think I deserved peace or happiness." "You deserve everything good," Brielle said fiercely. "You're the best man I know, Harrison." "I'm the luckiest man I know," he corrected, kissing her forehead. "To have found you, to have this chance at a real life." They filed the homestead claim in December, spending their first Christmas in their own home with a small celebration that felt perfect in its simplicity. Dorothy had taught Brielle to make tamales, and Harrison had shot a turkey that Brielle roasted to perfection. They exchanged modest gifts, treasuring them because they represented the thoughtfulness behind them. Life settled into a new rhythm as they split their time between the homestead and their work at the Double K. Harrison continued as foreman while building up their own small herd of cattle, and Brielle still helped Dorothy several days a week, saving every penny they could toward proving up their claim and expanding their operation. In the spring, Brielle discovered she was pregnant. She told Harrison one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests, then held her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her cry. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his joy was evident. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said. Terrified, excited, grateful beyond measure. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Brielle continued working as long as she could, determined to prove she was as tough as any ranch wife. Dorothy fussed over her, making sure she rested and ate properly, and Harrison became almost comically protective, worrying over every little thing. Their son was born in late autumn of 1884, arriving in the early morning hours with Dorothy serving as midwife and Harrison pacing anxiously outside. When Dorothy finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy boy, Harrison burst into the room and fell to his knees beside the bed where Brielle held their newborn. "He's perfect," Harrison whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one rough finger. "You're perfect." "God, Brielle, I love you so much." They named him Henry after Brielle's father, and he was indeed perfect with dark hair like his father and blue-green eyes like his mother. Harrison proved to be a devoted father, waking for nighttime feedings and changing diapers without complaint, marveling at every small milestone. Life became fuller and richer with Henry in it. The homestead thrived as they worked it together, their small herd growing, their garden producing more each year. They proved up their claim successfully, gaining full ownership of the land that had once belonged to Catherine Marsh. Brielle often thought of her aunt with gratitude, knowing that Catherine's invitation had led her to this life, this love, this family. Walter Kincaid's health began to fail when Henry was 2 years old, and it became clear that the ranch needed new leadership. Walter called Harrison to the house one day and made him an offer that stunned them both. He wanted Harrison to buy the Double K, taking over operations entirely. "We've got no children to leave it to," Walter explained, his voice weak but determined. "And you've proven yourself more than capable. Dorothy and I trust you, Harrison. We know you'll honor what we've built here." Harrison discussed it with Brielle that night, both of them weighing the opportunity carefully. It would mean taking on significant debt, expanding their responsibilities, but it was also a chance to build something lasting for Henry and any children who might follow. "What do you want to do?" Brielle asked, rocking a sleeping Henry in her arms. "I want to say yes," Harrison admitted. "But only if you're with me on this. It will be hard work, harder than what we're doing now." "We've never been afraid of hard work," Brielle said. "And I believe in you, in us. If this is what you want, then we'll find a way to make it work." They purchased the Double K in the spring of 1887, taking out loans and pouring all their savings into the deal. Walter and Dorothy moved to a small house in town, though they visited often, and Walter continued to offer advice when asked. Harrison proved to be an excellent rancher, fair to the hands and smart about the business. Brielle managed the books and the household, her education and natural intelligence making her invaluable to the operation. The ranch flourished under their leadership. They expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and developed a reputation for quality cattle that brought good prices at market. The work was relentless, but they tackled it together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. Henry grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. When he was 4, Brielle gave birth to a daughter they named Helen, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's delicate features and her father's serious expression. 2 years later came another son, James, completing their family. The children thrived in the desert air, growing strong and healthy. Harrison taught them to ride and rope, to read the land and respect the animals they raised. Brielle taught them reading and arithmetic, music and manners, determined that they would have advantages she and Harrison had fought so hard to achieve. Walter Kincaid passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1890, with Dorothy following him just 6 months later. They left their remaining property to Harrison and Brielle, recognizing them as the children they had never had. The funerals were well attended, testament to the respect the Kincaids had earned in their years in New Mexico, and Harrison gave eulogies that left few dry eyes. "They gave us our start," he said to Brielle that night as they lay in bed. "Everything we have, everything we've built started because Walter gave me a job and a chance, because Dorothy gave you work when you needed it most. They'd be proud of what we've done," Brielle assured him. "Of the family we've raised, the life we've built." The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of seasons and work and family. Steins Pass grew from a small outpost to a proper town, with a school and a larger church and businesses that served the growing population. The Apache troubles became history, though Harrison made sure his children understood the full story, including the injustices that had been done to the native peoples. Harrison and Brielle's marriage remained strong, weathering the inevitable conflicts and challenges that came with running a large ranch and raising 3 children. They had learned to communicate honestly, to support each other through difficult times, and to celebrate victories together. The passion that had drawn them together never faded, and they still found moments to steal away together, to remember the people they had been when they first met at the train station. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison took Brielle back to that very station, standing on the platform where he had first seen her sitting alone in the heat. "You ever regret it?" he asked, holding her hand. "Coming west, ending up here?" Brielle looked at him, this man who had saved her life in every way that mattered, who had given her love and family and purpose. "Never," she said firmly. "That day was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though I didn't know it at the time. Is there somewhere I can take you?" Harrison asked with a smile, echoing the words he had spoken all those years ago. "Home," Brielle said. "Always home with you." They stood there for a moment longer, remembering the frightened young woman and the kind cowboy who had stopped to help her, marveling at how far they had come together. By 1895, the Double K Ranch was one of the most successful operations in southern New Mexico. Henry was 11 and already showing signs of being a natural rancher like his father. Helen was 7, smart as a whip, and determined to prove she could do anything her brothers could. James was 5 and still more interested in playing than working, but Harrison said there was time yet for him to find his path. Brielle had become a respected figure in the community, serving on the school board and organizing charitable efforts for families in need. She never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure no one in their community suffered that fate if she could prevent it. Harrison had mellowed with age and success, though he still worked as hard as any of his hands. He had finally made peace with his past, using his experiences to make better choices in the present. He was known as a fair employer and a generous neighbor, willing to help anyone who needed it. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch of their homestead, which they still maintained as a retreat from the busier main ranch. The children were staying with friends in town, giving them a rare night alone together. "You remember the first time we came here?" Brielle asked, leaning against Harrison's shoulder. "When you asked me to marry you." "I remember every moment I've spent with you," Harrison said, pulling her closer. "But yes, that day stands out particularly. We've built such a good life," she said softly, "better than I ever dreamed possible." "We have," he agreed, "and we're not done yet. We've got years ahead of us watching our children grow, maybe meeting grandchildren someday. Brielle smiled at the thought. I can see Henry taking over the ranch eventually. He loves it the way you do. And Helen will probably run her own business in town, knowing her, Harrison added with a chuckle. She's too independent to be content staying home. Like someone else I know, Brielle teased, poking him gently. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The desert had become home in every sense of the word, no longer foreign or frightening but familiar and beloved. The life they had built together was rooted in this land, in the hard work and love they had poured into it. Thank you, Brielle said suddenly. For what? For seeing me that day at the train station. For stopping to help when you could have just walked past. For giving me a chance at this life. Harrison turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You made me believe in second chances, in the possibility of happiness after darkness. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to be better. She kissed him then, the kiss of a woman who had loved her husband for 12 years and would love him for all the years to come. They had weathered storms together, celebrated triumphs together, and built something that would last long after they were gone. As full darkness fell and the stars emerged in the vast New Mexico sky, Harrison and Brielle went inside their home, content in the knowledge that they had found exactly what they were meant to find, each other, and a love that had transformed both their lives from broken pieces into something whole and beautiful. The years that followed brought more changes and challenges. Henry grew into a responsible young man who gradually took on more of the ranch operations, freeing Harrison to focus on expansion and breeding programs. Helen indeed proved to be fiercely independent, eventually opening a small bookshop in town that became a gathering place for the community. James found his calling working with horses, becoming an expert in training and care that brought additional income to the ranch. Through it all, Harrison and Brielle remained each other's anchor and greatest support. They grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces gaining lines, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something richer and more complex than the passionate romance of their youth. In 1903, Henry married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and the following year they gave Harrison and Brielle their first grandchild, a boy they named Walter after the man who had given the Kellers their start. Harrison held his grandson with tears in his eyes, marveling at the continuation of the family they had created. Look at what we started, he whispered to Brielle as they watched Henry and his wife settle into a house they had built on ranch property. That day at the train station, we were just two lost people trying to find our way. Now look at all of this. We found more than our way, Brielle said, her own eyes wet. We found everything that matters. They lived to see all 3 of their children married and settled, to welcome 6 grandchildren into the world, to watch the ranch continue to thrive under Henry's capable management. They grew old together in the house they had made their own, surrounded by family and the land they had worked so hard to build into something lasting. Harrison passed away peacefully in the winter of 1918, with Brielle holding his hand, and all their children and grandchildren gathered around. His last words were of love for his family and gratitude for the life he had been given. Brielle mourned him deeply, but found comfort in their children and in the knowledge that they had made the most of every moment together. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see 2 great-grandchildren born and to know that the legacy she and Harrison had created would continue for generations. She spent her final years writing down their story, wanting future generations to know how it all began, with a frightened woman sitting alone at a train station and a kind cowboy who stopped to ask if there was somewhere he could take her. Brielle died in her sleep on a warm spring night in 1923, 40 years to the day after she first arrived in Steins Pass. Her children buried her next to Harrison on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a simple stone that read, "Together they found home." The Double K Ranch remained in the Keller family for generations, a testament to the love and hard work of two people who had found each other against all odds. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the greatest blessings, and that kindness to a stranger can change the course of everything. The train station in Steins Pass eventually closed as rail traffic declined, but the building remained standing for many years, a quiet monument to the place where two lives intersected and became one. Locals told stories about the woman who arrived with nothing and the cowboy who offered her everything, their romance becoming part of the town's history. In the end, it was a simple story. Two people who needed each other, who chose love over fear, who built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate pasts. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the New Mexico desert, proof that the right person at the right moment can change everything. Harrison and Brielle's descendants continued to thrive on the land they had claimed, carrying forward the values of hard work, kindness, and family that the couple had instilled. The ranch evolved with the times but never lost its essential character, remaining a place where love and dedication mattered more than anything else. And somewhere in the archives of the family, Brielle's carefully written account of their story survived, a treasure passed down through generations. In her own words, she had captured the fear and hope of that day at the train station, the kindness of a stranger who became her everything, and the life they had built together through determination and love. Her final entry in that journal reads simply, "If I could go back and tell that frightened girl on the platform what her future held, I would tell her this: trust the cowboy with kind eyes. Say yes when he asks if there is somewhere he can take you. Follow him into the desert and the unknown, because he will lead you home to a love greater than you ever imagined possible. Trust in the journey, for it will take you exactly where you need to be."